When I started Motörhead, I thought, well, nobody's going to want to hear this, but I want to do it anyway. And now, 16 years later, I'm still doing it. Same horrible fucking band, and people are still queuing up to see it, so it's all right. The easy way to survive is to you don't give up, right? I mean, it's just as simple as that. I never considered giving up.
Motorhead are really a very hard group to sum up in one sentence, but I think if you had to do it, you could do no better than going back to their very earliest reviews, and particularly the one that said, if Motorhead moved in next door to you, your lawn would die. I think that says it all.
Motorhead, for me, are the most fantastic adrenaline rush in the world. And you have to have it, at least once a year, if not more. And without it, life just isn't the same.
There was one in Barcelona in Spain, and the audience, the place was absolutely packed solid. It was a pretty big venue, and when the lights went out and we walked on, it erupted. The noise was incredible. I was walking on with Lemmy and went, listen to this. Is it there up for it, aren't they? And it was deafening. We had a fantastic gig. But we have lots of great shows all over the place, Japan, Brazil, Argentina, Australia. Everywhere we played, really. We had Germany, Hammersmith, of course. Terrific.
Oh, I had a ball. I had an absolute ball. And Lemmy, people think he's Mr. Hardman and all this. He's not. He's just big softy. He's useless. He's a big softy.
What?
If someone said, well, what is a Motorhead? Well, it's Lemmy. Still believing, still doing it, still being Lemmy, not giving a toss about any, you should be doing this, Lemmy, you should be doing that. Lemmy does what Lemmy wants to do. Lemmy is a great musician. He's a great musician, a great rocker, and a great example for children.
Shut up! You talk too loud! You don't fit in with the crowd!
In a way, that's the sort of way that we worked as a record label, is that we would take the image and the music and cater to the fans that we knew were there. And we understood that market. I think the reason that the majors never signed Motorhead effectively was they just simply didn't understand the music. They don't understand touring.
Why is there so much violence on the road? Why do you break things in auto roads? I mean, the violence. I mean, when you start doing things.
Fucking violence!
I mean, one of the interesting things that I did find was, because I always go and check out bands live before I work with them. The interesting thing about Motorhead is you stick your fingers in your ears when they're playing.
Loudest band in the world, reputation. I think they built the biggest sound system this country at that time had ever seen. But I can tell you, I was at the sound check, standing in the middle of the bloody football field, and it was like, as Man of War said, it was the black wind. No, that's loud.
I remember a few gigs I walked past my stacks, I thought I could only hear them. Well, I got to Lemmy and I could only hear him. And I walked across the other side of the station, all I could hear was Phil. I thought, good God, all their hearing's gone.
About to lose, I gamble it's for fools, but that's the way I like it, babe. I don't want to live forever.
You're hearing basic, brutal, raw rock and roll, loud, in your face, the way it's meant to be.
No idea who Lemmy was. I hadn't really heard of Hawkwind. I had no idea. In fact, I think it took me a long time to realise that Lemmy sang on Silver Machine with Hawkwind, and if you've ever heard that record, you wouldn't believe that it was Lemmy. I mean, he sings really well, I mean, properly, whereas when he sings on Motorhead, he's singing this gravelly, I don't know quite how he gets there, but it's a completely different voice. So I wasn't even aware of that.
Well, the problem with Lemmy and Hawkwind is more of a visa problem than anything else, because he had a... It wasn't that he was doing drugs and the others were clean, but the fact because he had a conviction, he couldn't get a visa to get into America, and Hawkwind had an American tour coming up, and they wanted to do that American tour. They couldn't do it at their bassist, and rather than thinking, we'll draft somebody else in temporarily, they kicked Lemmy out. They just said, that's it, no, we'll get someone else. Bye, see you, have fun. And of course that was it, everyone thought, never hear from him again. He decided, I'm going to put together a band called Bastard.
He was absolutely intent that the group should be called Bastard, and he sent a press release to his first manager, Doug Smith, who was the Hawkwind manager, saying Lemmy has formed his own, left Hawkwind, sacked, left Hawkwind and has formed his own group called Bastard. Doug knew full well this wasn't going to be something Radio 1 were going to jump all over, and as Radio 1 were the only game in town in those days, that was kind of a hindrance. So he took it upon himself to call the group Motorhead. Lemmy didn't forgive him, and I don't think has forgiven him to this day, even though Motorhead is probably got to be one of the greatest names for a band of that ilk ever.
No, I got fired from Hawkwind. You know, actually, Hawkwind was very similar to Motorhead. If you listen inside Hawkwind, there's a three-piece rock band. Right, you get all this talili and toot on the top, but inside is a rock band, three-piece rock and roll band. You know, I just wanted to play like I wanted to be the MC5, really. That's what I wanted to be. I want to have a singer and two guitarists, you know, in the beginning. And then, of course, you know, the singer gave it up, you know, and one of the guitarists couldn't get along with the other one, you know. It's my solo, no, it's mine. You know, guitar players, bloody same. So I ended up, I had to do the singing, you know. Jesus. So we just wound up as a three-piece. Everything in your life really is accidents, you know what I mean? The whole thing. You think about it, all the important parts of your life is an accident. Everything that you plan is shit. But the accidents is when you go up, yeah?
Fast Eddie Clarke was actually Curtis Knight, Soul Man's guitarist, and he, for whatever reason, decided to audition for Motorhead and had the beautiful moment of Lemmy knocking on his door at some ungodly hour with a leather jacket and a bullet belt saying, "You've got the gig, man, sniff this, drink this and sign here." And Filthy I think was just a little punk who came down from somewhere up north, and Lemmy took him under his wing, and especially when he found out he could drum the way that he drummed. I think that was all to do with large amounts of decongestant nasal powders that they used to use. But I mean, yeah, it was well, all basically formed from Lemmy being pissed off at being sacked from Hawkwind, and thank God he was, because we wouldn't have Motorhead now.
Sunshine,
Motorhead's very first track was the song Motorhead, which of course was the Hawkwind number. Now it's not that different from the way Hawkwind did it. Slightly less psychedelic, slightly heavier and slightly dirtier, but not that far removed. But it's a great introduction because it sets the scene for everything Motorhead have done since in what is now coming up to 30 years together. So if you want to introduce yourself to the band, listen to the anthem, the eponymous anthem.
To this day, you can't go to a Motorhead show and not have them play Motorhead. You know, this is what you want from a Motorhead show. When you buy a ticket to see Motorhead, you must see them play Motorhead. It's the law.
Motorhead, first album, released August 1977. Sadly, it didn't chart. Possibly not the most high-quality recorded album ever in the world, but I think it firmly stamped Motorhead's sound and the direction it was going to go onto the world.
The first Motorhead album was an absolute classic. I remember Nick Kent in The NME reviewed it and called them the worst band in the world, which Lemmy has never forgiven him for, but in actual fact made you incredibly curious. I mean, if this is the worst band in the world, how cool must that be?
The album Motorhead was made for Chiswick, an independent label. It's Motorhead's debut, except it wasn't Motorhead's debut. It was their first album to come out, but they'd recorded an album already for United Artists called On Parole, with a lineup of Lucas Fox and Larry Wallace. The problem was United Artists didn't know what they were getting. They thought they were getting another Hawkwind, because Hawkwind were on the label. They heard the Motorhead album and thought, not really what we want, chaps. Tell you what, we'll put it on the shelf and think about it. They let Motorhead go from the label. Motorhead signed to Chiswick, did the Motorhead album with a different lineup. Filthy Animal Taylor and Fast Eddie Clarke came into the picture. And it was very much along the same lines as what we were to hear a couple of years later when On Parole finally hit the streets. Inevitably, United Artists deciding to release it at a time when Motorhead had established themselves as a credible entity.
What happened was that they had a tour. We had a booking agency as well as a record label, and the booking agency had arranged a UK tour for Motorhead, and the promoter said to them, if you don't get a single out, there's nothing for me to promote, I'm going to cancel the tour. So Neil Warnock, who ran Bron Agency, came to me and said, look, we've got a real problem here because we've got this tour, it's all ready to go, but the promoter says unless there's a single out there, he's going to cancel the tour. And I said, well, anyone put a single out. He said, well, no one will put out a single of Motorhead. So I said, well, I'll put it out. I'll put it out on bronze. You know, it costs nothing to do it. So we put out Louie Louie. And I heard Louie Louie just before it came out, and I thought it was the worst record I'd ever heard in my life. And it went in the charts at number 73, first week in. So I thought, well, I have to be wrong here. And I went to the Odeon Hammersmith and saw them for the first time and realised, you know, 5,000 people going completely potty, that they were a band that we should be signing, and that's how we signed them.
Overkill was very much the first Motorhead album that I think the rest of the world first paid attention to. You've got this amazing title track, of course, Overkill, which talk about it does what it says on the tin.
Overkill! Overkill!
For me, if I was asked to give the best track of all, it would be Overkill. And I spoke to Eddie Clarke about it, funnily enough, and Phil Taylor wanted an excuse to have an extra kick drum or bass drum. He wanted two, like Ginger Baker, I guess, but he needed a reason to have two. So he bought another one and thought, well, it can be a spare for the tour, and the pedal can be the spare for the tour anyway. So I've not lost anything. So he integrated it into his kit. And Lemmy and Phil came into the rehearsals one morning when they were sort of getting the songs together for Overkill, and they heard this bada 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 bada, and they thought, fuck, hell, what's going on? And went in, and Phil was playing this. And they said, don't stop, let's get the tape recorder and tape this a bit quick, you know. So they taped it. And of course, as the song develops, you know, Lemmy sort of starts off his bit on about the 12th fret and sort of sounds like a B-52 bomber sort of coming into land as it flows on down. And I said to Eddie about it, and he said, well, yeah, he said, Phil was absolutely going crackers on the kit, and Lemmy was going crackers on the bass. And he said, I thought, if I go crackers as well, it's going to be a bit silly. And if you kind of listen to Eddie's chords on there, they're pretty kind of laid back, and they're sort of ding, 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 ding. They're very, he chose them extremely well.
Don't sweat it. We're getting back to you. Overkill. Overkill. Overkill.
I remember seeing the band live on the Overkill tour out at Friars in Aylesbury, and we were warned before we went in. A whole posse of music journalists were taken down to see them, and we were warned before we went in that we might need earplugs because it would be very, very loud indeed. And of course nobody would be wussy enough to put earplugs in, especially in those days. But within 5 minutes it was like, where are the earplugs? They were incredibly loud, incredibly entertaining. And Overkill, along with the track Motorhead, you know, really embodied everything that was so exciting about Motorhead. No messing around guitar solos, no messing around keeping a beat with the drums, just bing, bang, bish, bash, bosh, wallop, 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 and as fast as you can go, and no stopping till the end.
Overkill itself is the false ending. That's a DJ's nightmare, and I just loved that. I just loved how it ends, and it's off again. It ends, and it's off again. Absolutely brilliant.
What I think I realised by going to the Hammersmith Odeon was that their following was so fantastic. I mean, I'm sure that the Odeon was representative of all the other 12 dates that they did, and every single one of those people was going to buy the next album. So there you are, you're talking about 100,000 albums straight off.
The audience Motorhead had in those days was incredible. I mean, of course, you got, you know, a lot of biker kind of dudes, a lot of acid heads, a lot of Hawkwind leftovers, a lot of punk kids that were looking for, that were Damned fans or Pistols fans, really enjoyed that kind of theatre of the absurd, which Motorhead also embodied, but really wanted some real head-banging music, not at all in a heavy metal sense, in a literal banging your head sense. They were also very warm and wonderful people that really identified with Lemmy. I remember standing with Lemmy on the side of the stage at the Newcastle City Hall in those days, and he was watching the support band. You know, the support band on the tour was called Tank, and he was out there checking them out, you know, and some of the kids from the side could see him hiding behind an amplifier, and they started going crazy, and I remember he just looked at them and he went like that. And it was, you know, that said it all. There was none of this. It was all, and it just said it all. It was the, you know, yeah, right, yeah, that's all right, mate, no messing. And I thought, wow, Lemmy.
Lemmy is Lemmy. He is an intelligent, scruffy, scuzzbaggish, artistic genius.
Do we expect for the future of mankind?
Oh, awful terror, unnecessary violence, unmitigated hell. We're all going to go down in a soup made of ourselves.
Really?
And we all got a wooden spoon. The human race is stupid. Human race has always been stupid. And the intelligent people would never get the hearing the stupid people you listen to, always. It's like fashion, yeah? Fashionable to have a war, fashionable to be vegetarian, you know? Fashionable to give up smoking. You know what I mean? It's all bullshit, man. It's just fashion. Hitler was a vegetarian, didn't smoke, didn't drink. Perfect guy, right, for the 80s, right?
Have you ever thought about that you marry some girl?
I have thought about it, yeah. I didn't do it. I thought about it. I must have taken about probably half an hour thinking about it. And I thought, no, I'm not interested, you know. It's, there's something wrong in my character, you know. I'm badly adjusted. Dr. Spock failed with me, yeah. I am not your average, you know, 2.5 children family man, you know. I don't want to know about it. I like chasing women. That's what I like. Most people get married and then they chase women also. And this is not honest, yeah? And I'm an honest man. I like to chase women. I'm not going to get married. If I was going to get married, I would get married and I'll never go with another woman except for my wife, right? And I can't do it, so I don't do it.
What is Lemmy like? Oh, he's going to fucking hate me for this. Lemmy's Lemmy, and you get him on a good day, and he's fantastic. You get him on one of his moody days, and he's moody. You know, Lemmy. What you've got to remember is this is a man who's taken enormous amounts of amphetamines, drinking enormous amounts, playing rock and roll constantly, and no matter, you know, most people would do that occasionally. This is a man who does it day in, day out. Now that has got to fluctuate your mood. You must have mood swings. So, yeah, some days Lemmy's a bit grumpy, but at the same time, he's one of the funniest, wittiest, and best men you could ever hope to sit down and drink with and talk to, and you know, hopefully be a friend to, which you know I'd like to think I am a friend. having been around for quite a long time. But yeah, he's you have to be careful what you say to Lemmy sometimes. Say the wrong thing and he'll snap your head off, just like that. Shove it up your arse and won't even say goodbye. It's all over. But I love him. Lemmy, I love you. I wish you were my dad.
Can he sing? No. Neither can Ozzy. Neither can David Lee Roth. So what? But he actually presents a song as a story. He's great at telling a story with a song. As soon as you hear the voice, you know who it is. Unmistakably Lemmy.
Are you still there? What? Let me speak up, will you?
Lemmy has never, in my opinion, been given credit for his lyrics, which actually are very meaningful and are not just ordinary puerile lyrics or what most people write any old word to any old note. Lemmy wrote about things that he believed in.
I don't read lyrics. I don't really listen to lyrics that much. I just go for an overall sound. I just want to be beaten down by an overall sound, and if it's got vocals in there somewhere, you know, fantastic, as long as that vocals are making some sort of sound. And so I'm a very bad person for not listening to lyrics. And I remember Motorhead playing Brixton, and afterwards going up to them, he's playing the Fruit Machine, and they played a few tracks off the new, whatever the new, I can't remember what the new album was. Might have been Sacrifice. And then he's like, "Oh, what do you think of the new songs?" And I'm going, "Well, it sounded great to me, Lemmy." He said, "What do you think of the lyrics?" I said, "Well," and I've said just exactly what I've just said now. Lemmy, I'm not a great lover of, you know, listening to lyrics. I just go for the overall sound. And he just looked at me and said, "Thanks a fucking lot."
I've known Lemmy off and on. I've known Lemmy off and on for nearly 30 years. And I did ask him once, in fact, because I wanted to know, are you for real? Now, I know Lemmy's for real, but I thought, let's put it to him. So I said, "Lemmy, when you go home at night, do you take off the black shirt, the white boots, the dirty old jeans, and do you sort of put them aside and get your dressing gown on and your slippers?" And he said, "Mick, I've been wearing these black jeans since 1972. The only reason you can't see the holes in the knee is because I paint my knees black." He said, "The only thing I've ever replaced are the white boots." He said, "For some reason, the left side always goes before the right side." He said, "So I've got a lot of right-footed white boots at home." He said, "But they're the only things I ever change. The rest stays the same. I don't wear a costume. This is me. What you see is what you get."
He's got such control over the audience. He really is. He's fantastic to be on stage with. You don't have to worry about anything. It's like he's solid there all the time. Excellent. He knows exactly what he's doing, what he should do after all this time. Well, he knows exactly what he's up to. He knows how to speak to the audience, even if he's slagging them off, which he quite often does. But he gets away with it. He has a really good manner. He's got a very powerful countenance. But on stage, it's the business up there. He works really, really well with you. You know, it's not just trying up stage or anything. He's 18. You know. He's really good at that.
Bomber, fabulous album. Of course, the thing you've got to remember with Motorhead in those days is that the albums are very much the platform upon which they built the live show. The albums were done extremely fast, No messing about, none of this. We're going to spend 3 months in the country writing some songs and then 3 months rehearsing them and then another 6 months working with a top producer and seeing what good textures we can come up with. It was, what are you doing at 9 o'clock on a Friday night? Let's get in there and we'll be finished by Monday morning. We won't sleep, but we won't mess around either.
Bomber. What an album. I designed the tour programme for this tour, actually. And not only is it a fine album, let's see what you got on here. Dead Men Tell No Tales, classic. Lawman, it's okay. Sweet Revenge, Sharpshooter, Poison, all of them good Motorhead songs. Not ones that they played on stage that much, that must be said. But then you got Stone Dead Forever, All the Aces, Step Down, Talking Head, and of course the track Bomber. And yeah, it's the next step up from Overkill. It definitely is the next step up from Overkill. Great cover, brilliant cover. Who the hell did that cover? Some bastard. Doesn't say, does it? Just typical, isn't it? Get someone great to do the cover and not put their credits up. Not even a thing in here to give it credit. That's outrageous.
Firestorm coming closer. Napalm to the bone. Because you know we do it right. A mission every night. It's a bomber. It's a bomber. It's a bomber.
Lemmy has a fascination with World War II aircraft, World War II insignia. He's particularly interested in the Luftwaffe, not because he's a Nazi, but he just enjoys that whole era of technology, the uniforms, the equipment, the tanks. He used to build a lot of airfix models. When I used to visit him at his house, the whole house would be covered in these models that he'd spend hours and hours and hours building and painting. So Bomber came from that, and live, Bomber would be the last number of the night, and the lighting rig was fashioned like the wings of a Spitfire. I think in Lemmy's mind it was a Messerschmitt, but for the rest of us it was a Spitfire.
Yeah, I can remember going into the offices and Doug Smith, their manager, going, "You're not going to believe this, Crush, we're going to have a bomber, an actual bomber as the lighting rig, and it's going to move." And I'm like, "What? Fly out over there? No, don't be stupid. It's going to dip like it's flying, you know." That's brilliant, absolutely brilliant idea. And then when, of course, I saw it, it was like, oh, yeah. I mean, but it's now it's just a simple stage trick, so to speak. But back then, it was like, oh, good one.
Commercially, Ace of Spades was the one. It took them over the top and finally made them into a band that everybody knew. They became the rock band that the mainstream liked. There was always one band that the mainstream would pick up on in terms of rock that they would accept and like. It was almost like they would say, certainly in the media, "We like rock music, we like Motorhead, we play Motorhead, we have Lemmy as a guest on our shows." That's the way they got out of the fact that they didn't really want to associate themselves. So along came Lemmy, character, looked good, articulate, and they thought, we'll pick up on him. And of course, Motorhead sound was rock and roll. It was far easier to get into than, let's say, Black Sabbath, or a little later, Iron Maiden, because it wasn't so heavy. It was very much predicated in the 50s roots.
Ace of Spades, released October 1980, I believe, number 4 in the album charts. This is the limited edition gold vinyl, and I'll treat you to virgin. This is virgin vinyl. Never been. Look at, oh, my eyes, the rock. And what have we got on here? We've got Ace of Spades. It's a classic. has got to be in the top 3 classics rock songs of all time. Paranoid and maybe Communication Breakdown are the other 2.
Well, Ace of Spades for me is the album. And I think it's because I absolutely love Eddie's playing on Ace of Spades. And of course, it's now being used in an advert, so everyone hears it again and again. But to me, that's the epitome of what they were about. I think he's a great guitarist, and his licks in Ace of Spades that's what Motorhead is about to me. And there's a wonderful combination of the way Lemmy sings Ace of Spades and Eddie puts those licks in. It's the epitome. To me, that's their best track. If you said to me which is Motorhead's best track, I would say Ace of Spades. I'm sure Lemmy wouldn't agree with me, but to me that's got everything in it.
You'd think this is the Arizona desert, wouldn't you? It's actually shot in a stone sand quarry in High Wycombe, Barnet. And I think the clouds are actually superimposed later because it was a miserable day. But look at that look. These are men not to be messed with. Apparently Lemmy based his look on Maverick. I think he wanted to be Clint Eastwood, Fast Eddie. And, well, obviously some Mexican, Spanish, badass motherfucker.
You know I'm going to lose, the gambling's for fools, but that's the way I like it, baby. I don't want to live forever. And don't forget the Joker.
I did try and take Lemmy to task about the lyrics once, because there's the classic line, I don't want to live forever. And I said, isn't that a bit like when Pete Townsend wrote the line, hope I die before I get old? And he said, absolutely not. He said, because Townsend had actually screwed up, because hope I die before I get old means you're going to die soon. Whereas Lemmy saying, I don't want to live forever, actually meant, you know, he could die the day before forever. In other words, he could live to be thousands of years old, drink millions of bottles of bourbon, take zillions of drugs, and make love to billions of gorgeous, scantily clad, tattooed ladies. So I don't want to live forever was his way, as he explained it to me, of actually saying, I want it all, and I want it for as long as I can get it, mate.
I think the single only got to like number 15 in the charts. And if I remember rightly, well, he used to do it all the time when he had to play Motorhead, but Tony Blackburn was then presenting the top 40 every Sunday. And what a miserable piece of shite he is. Every time he had to play Motorhead, he would give a rank, just a horrible verbal abuse to the band, saying, oh, can't believe that we've had to play that one. Well, you have, Tony, so get used to it, and people like it, and that's why they're in the chart, and you're not there to tell us what we shouldn't be listening to. Just play the record and get on to the next one, you arse chicken. But yeah, Ace of Spades, damn good album.
Pushing up the ante, I know you got to see me. Freedom and weep, the dead man's hand again.
Motorhead have had some very talented guitarists throughout their career. Larry Wallace, Fast Eddie Clarke, Bron, Robertson, Phil Campbell and Wurzel. 5 guitarists in all spanning 30 years. The most talented guitarist they've had, Bron Robertson, absolutely no question. Far and away the most gifted guitarist ever in Motorhead, and one of the most gifted guitarists ever to come out of the British Isles. The most important guitarist, again, no question, Fast Eddie Clarke. He defined the sound. Not as technically gifted at all as Bron Robertson, but he's Motorhead's guitarist. He was there defining the sound on the great moments in Motorhead's career. You can't go against him. You have to understand and appreciate the fact he is the guy who created a guitar sound that really defined what Motorhead were about and made Motorhead what they became. And I think part of the reason why it worked with Fast Eddie at the time was because he wasn't that technically gifted. He was very basic. And because he was very basic, he didn't try and be clever. He just stuck to what he knew, and what he knew worked perfectly for Motorhead.
You've only got to sit there with Eddie and he starts playing a lick and you go, oh, fantastic, you know. It's just, you don't even have to, he just does it. You don't have to say to him, how about this? He just plays something. And you go, oh, that's terrific. Oh, you like that? Oh, I'll do a bit more of it. I mean, he's a natural.
Get up close, you know, I just ain't got a word to say. Please don't touch, I shade so much. Please don't touch, I shade so much.
When Motorhead started to have huge success, they took under their wings an all-girl band called Girlschool, who were managed by Doug Smith, their manager, signed to their same label, Bron's Records. Motorhead got on with them. They took them out on the road as a support band. Whatever else might or might not have happened, we won't go into. But it was a marriage and a match made in hell, as it were, because they got on really well. They were all down-to-earth characters. Motorhead actually liked Girlschool as a band and really wanted to introduce them, give them an opportunity to get on. And Girlschool took that opportunity and got quite a long way down the line.
My own opinion about Girlschool is that we would never have signed them if it weren't for Motorhead. And I think that everything they ever did was based on the fact there was some relationship, not in any other, that they were in the same stable. And they were never quite what people thought they were going to be. Kelly looked like Farrah Fawcett Major from about 200 miles away, but when you got up close to her, she wasn't that great looking. And if they'd been four fantastic looking chicks and they played a bit better than they played, they might have been more successful, but they never. I'm quite sure that we wouldn't have signed them, and I think most other people wouldn't have signed them if it weren't for the Motorhead connection.
She's got her clothes on me, 'cause I ain't frightened, baby, can't you see? Sneaking up the stairway, running like a thief, spend the night just shaking like a leaf. Remember the first time I took her to a cheap motel? Woke up drunk, you know I felt like Eskimo now. Please don't touch, I shake so much. Please don't touch, I shake.
Girlschool and Motorhead produced a 3-track EP, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I designed this. See, that's a heart with a machine gun coming out, and those little ratchets make it's like a machine gun noise. Fabulous piece of design. Yeah, Head Girl, Bronze 116, the catalogue number. 3-track EP, Please Don't Touch, covered with Bomber and Emergency. And I believe, if my memory serves me rightly, look, there's a little filthy animal Cupid there. I think it got in the top 5.
Lemmy, how long have you been on the road?
How long have I been on the road?
Yeah.
19 years.
19 years?
Yeah, give or take a year.
I mean, isn't it boring after a while?
No.
You like it?
Because you're always in different places. See what I mean, French people?
I mean, why do you do such a heavy group? Can't you play it a little softer?
Yeah, we could do. We could do, but I'm not going to. We like it. We don't like little softies.
But don't you think there is a point after which there is no comeback, no return? It's a one-way to hell, maybe.
Right.
So what you gonna do?
Go to hell.
Motorhead have always been a live band. First and foremost, they live and work on the road. They're like gypsies. They just live and work and eat and sleep and drink and fuck the road.
Well, the great story about No Sleep to Hammersmith is that they made it as a live recording, and Vic Mail was the producer, and he finished it off, and we were about to release it, and we got a telex, or I think, yes, I'm sure it was a telex from Lemmy, saying, this recording does not represent the band. Under no circumstances is it to be released, and we hereby decline any permission to release the record. And I sent probably a telex back saying, bit late, it's #1 in the charts this week.
It's so difficult to put into context No Sleep to Hammersmith. It was a #1 album for Motorhead. Put them straight at the top of the charts, and suddenly everybody went, wow, Motorhead #1 with a live album. Live was what they were always about.
We only ever had one #1 album in the whole of Bron's Records career, and that was it. So it says something. I think we promoted it the right. I think we did all the right things, but there were probably 120,000 people out there that went out and bought that record the day it came out.
Recorded live at Hammersmith Odeon. I was there, I believe. I wish I could remember it, but it's went into #1 in the UK album charts. That must have pissed off so many people in the music industry. One, that they didn't sign them, and two, that a band like Motorhead could have a #1 album. And not only that, a live album.
The great rock bands, the great rock and roll bands, always come alive on stage. That's where they're in their element. Facing a crowd, aggression, energy, backwards and forwards, that's where they really live. And while Motorhead, I'm sure, accepted that they had to go into a studio to record, it was on stage where they really came into their own, where they were louder than anybody else, more aggressive than anybody else, and where the crowd were absolutely mental and crazy. That's really learnt the Motorhead experience, not from listening to their albums. Their albums were an introduction, but if you really wanted to learn the lesson, you went and saw Motorhead live.
Hello. Here we have Filthy Animal's latest invention.
Oh man, he's like a demolition course, you know. It's like he doesn't play from the wrists, he doesn't play from there, he plays from the shoulder, and he hits the bloody things that he wants to kill somebody. Not the most technical drummer in the world, you would think. Having said which, I played with Phil with Frankie Miller later on, and he played just exactly like Simon Kirke from Bad Company and Free. So there's something in Mr. Filthy that is there, right? And he's a great geezer.
Filthy as a drummer is a bloody underrated drummer. I mean, you listen to those early albums. Overkill. The drumming on Overkill alone. It's not easy. It's not slow. You know, it's at a monstrous pace.
I think he might have found it hard to work in another band of another kind, but I also don't think Lemmy would have found anybody else to play like Phil.
Where did you find Phil?
I found him. I found him in the corner of my room, lying down, actually. Didn't I, Phil?
Why did they call you the animal, Phil?
Well, they didn't. It was
because he likes to scroll stations.
A young lady I used to know called me Filthy Animal.
Right.
A young lady I used to know.
She's not that young now, man.
Why is there so much violence on the road? Why do you break things in auto roads? I mean, the violence. I mean, when you start doing things.
Fucking violence!
No, he's great. He had a great feel, wonderful sense of humour, unique man, and a very, very honest, down to earth, beautiful chap, great bloke. I really liked him. He had a unique sense of humour, though. He made things up. He didn't copy from anybody. He just made them up. He was marvellous to be on tour with. He's a great guy to be with, and he had a good heart. Good man, Taylor.
He's one of the nicest geezers I've ever worked with in this business. He's one of the most weird drummers I've ever played with, but he still managed to bring it round to, you know, what you needed to go out and do the gig.
No, baby, I think he lives in LA. I think he's still in Los Angeles. I haven't seen him at all. Sent a few messages over for him with people that go over and bump into him, but I don't know. I hope he's okay. Yeah. I hope you're okay, Filthy.
I wish you'd just give me a call. Give me a bloody call, you wanker.
It is called the self-contained keeping cool machine with coat hanger and padding and gaffer tape. Now we switch on and everything explodes. What a wonderful invention. designed to keep you cool wherever you are. Dressing room, back of a bus, hotel lobby, in your bunk if it's too hot. Does it suit me? Yeah. After No Sleep for Hammersmith came Iron Fist. I designed this tour programme. I remember this is when it was all starting to go a little bit crazy.
The problem with Iron Fist was, conversely, the thing that had made Motorhead so interesting up until that point was that they appeared to be very instinctual. They didn't appear to spend too long thinking about things, too long pontificating about them. It was very visceral, very from the gut. If it felt right, it is right, let's do it. Conversely, Iron Fist was made in a dreadful hurry. It was the first album made to order, if you like, because Ace of Spades had been a very big hit. It had really changed everything for the group in terms of being famous, in terms of being sought after all over the world at this point, Australia, America, all over Europe. Suddenly they're in huge demand everywhere. And particularly in those days where albums are coming thick and fast, the idea of building a career, having some perspective on releases, none of that existed yet. It was if you're hot, you make the most of it now. And so they were dragged into the studio right in the middle of all this touring and told to make the follow-up to Ace of Spades.
Iron Fist was a massive disappointment to everybody. They were following off the back of 3 great studio albums, Overkill, Bomber, Ace of Spades, then into the great live album, No Sleep. The world was at their feet, or at least the UK was at their feet, and a lot of Europe as well. They could do no wrong, and they did some wrong, and it really didn't work. The problem with Iron Fist isn't necessarily the songs, the problem is the production. They decided, well, let's produce ourselves. Fast Eddie Clarke wants to be a producer. He's worked with 1 or 2 bands. Well, let him produce it. Didn't work. Fast Eddie wasn't very happy. He didn't seem into the project. And the whole thing just never really got off the ground. There were problems within the band, which certainly didn't help either. And I think what summed it up is they were going to do a great introduction to their stage set. What they were going to have was a screen that came down in front of the stage showing footage of Motorhead all dressed up, the 3 of them, in medieval garb, carrying swords and so forth, wandering around, looking menacing. And then the 3 of them were going to jump through the screen and start the show. It's a great idea, never came off and never worked and was never used. Part of the reason was I actually saw the footage that they shot as the intro. It looked like 3 idiots, completely pissed, just wandering around in a forest.
And while the songs themselves, particularly Iron Fist, which I think is a great track, one of their best by a long chalk, they were very conscious. Suddenly they're very self-conscious. Suddenly the need is there to make a follow-up, another hit. And although they tried very, very hard not to fall into that trap, inevitably it's exactly what happened. And I don't think any of the 3 original members that made the album will tell you anything particularly good about the experience, other than the fact that Iron Fist was a tremendous track.
Look at them. I mean, come on. Just look at them. They're wearing their faux medieval metal costumes. It was,
And they've given Filthy Animal a fucking sword to play with. That is probably one of the most dangerous things. And given him the iron fist. God almighty, what a killing machine that is. But yeah, it was a definitely odd period, this. It was, I mean, I remember going to the shoot for the Iron Fist single. And again, they were all dressed in their faux medieval metal costumes, riding horses through a forest in dense, dry ice. And I was thinking, no. Where's the bullet belts and the leather jackets gone? I don't want to see bloody Lemmy dressed as Henry VIII, thank you very much. I want my bullet belts back and my leather jackets back. And take your iron fist and shove it up your arse. The reason that Robbo was in was because Fast Eddie Clarke was so pissed off with Lemmy doing a version of Stand By Your Man with Wendy O. Williams, which is a pretty fucking good reason. But no, Wendy O. Williams, you know, I'd have given her one, but Lemmy certainly did give her one. And that, yeah, I mean, that song, Stand By Your Man, sadly, Fast Eddie Clarke wasn't going to stand by his man and walked out of Motorhead. That was the final straw. But I think Lemmy took the Wendy O. Williams Stand By Your Man as a serious project, and I think that's what really pissed Fast Eddie Clarke off, was the fact that, you know, okay, do it and, you know, and shag her, but, you know, don't do it and think it's, you know, it's going to be a masterpiece, because it's not. It is one of the fucking worst records I've ever heard in my goddamn life. And I loved Wendy O. Williams. I would have chopped an arm off, not my knob, but I would have chopped an arm off to shag Wendy O. Williams. But and I'm sure that's why Lemmy did that song, and I know he did, and that's always did put me off shagging her after that, because who wants to?
You know I'm bad, times I've had, I got a bad reputation. I don't care, I get my share, don't build no generation. I don't. The more I get, the better it is. I like it fine, I like a little whiz. Treat up my ladies, that's all right. You know the taste is better than the cat, you know.
I think the Lemmy, Filthy Animal, Taylor, Fast Eddie Clarke lineup these days is considered the classic lineup, partly because of rose-tinted spectacles. It was the original, it was the gang as we first came to know them. They were the three amigos. They had these great names, Fast Eddie, Filthy Animal, Lemmy. There's just something tremendous about that, you know. There's something always about the original gang that is always going to be cherished in the minds of their audience.
I really loved the Eddie, Filthy and Lemmy lineup. I thought that was superb. Excuse me, when I joined, I thought, how do I keep that style? How do I retain that sound? So I do want to change it. But obviously, as I said before, inevitably it does change. Because especially if you're writing, you'll write in a different way. But I always tried to keep it. I really loved it. I always tried to keep that image and as much of that sound as we could, but we had to move ahead. Terrific. I thought they were superb. They were unique. Very difficult, actually, to try and retain that.
That is Motorhead. I don't think that any replacements ever worked. And as far as I'm concerned, I mean, in fact, in Lemmy's book, he says, I think Gerry Bron lost interest in the band when Eddie left, and he's absolutely right.
I enjoyed every single second of it, and I honestly wouldn't put any of it behind me with any sort of, ooh, didn't like that. I did. It was great. And it was a very short period, but it was a very intense period. My input was pretty large, actually, because basically Motorhead had been a band that they would go in with a producer, and they'd do as the producer told them. So they go in there all together in the same studio and go bam, 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 and just do basically a live thing, right? I didn't really do that. I took the Lizzie thing into the Motorhead thing. So, and funnily enough, we had our producer, well, my old producer, from Thin Lizzy, was producing it. So it was kind of me and him worked together, right? And I don't think the other two boys understood that quite as much as I did.
Through my managers. I was approached by, I guess it would be Gerry Bron in those days, who was their label, to get involved and produce the album. I think he felt that with Robbo in the band, there was the potential there to maybe move Motorhead to expand their market a little bit, and I think he thought that I may be the person to help glue that together. Well, we spent a bit of time before we even got to the recording. We spent a bit of time doing some pre-production rehearsals to try and sort of frame the songs up. That was down at No Studios. And I guess what I was trying to do was to find out how far we could push it in which directions. And inevitably, I'd already started to realise that there were going to be, you know, some factions pushing backwards and forwards. Robbo, a very strong-minded guy, you know, he had his idea of where it could go, and potentially maybe a little more open-minded musically than everybody else. Lemmy, you know, it's his band, so he was always going to want to exert a certain amount of authority in that respect.
The great thing about Lemmy is, right, he sits down and he writes lyrics. I mean, he just sits on the machines for hours and lets you get on with whatever you're doing. And he comes in and he goes into a room and he comes back to you with these lyrics that are just incredible. I mean, 10 points to the guy. He's brilliant, right? We've done all the backing tracks, me and Tony Platt, who obviously did AC/DC Back in Black, and also the first Thin Lizzy album I ever worked on, right? So we were pretty close. And he walks in, he goes, this is bollocks, I'm going to the pub. So fuck off to the pub and okay, so you don't see him for a while. You don't see Filthy for a while because Filthy doesn't want to be there unless something's happening, right? Because he's that sort of guy. He wants to be doing things, right? And I lost the plot, and this was at rehearsals at the writing stage, and I sort of said, well, okay. We had a huge PA system in this enormous studios in West London. And so I just went, oh, well, look, you know, I'm just kind of cheesed off with this. We're trying to write an album here, and there isn't anybody here except me, so I'm a bit pissed off. So what I did was I mic'd the drums up, stuck them through the mixing desk, and then brought them back through the PA on a cassette. So I just sit there and play a load of drums, and then play it back through the PA, and then write the guitar riffs while Lemmy was in the pub. And then he'd come back and go, yeah, that's cool, right. And then he'd go off, and then when we got to the eventual studio, he'd disappear for half an hour and come back with these amazing lyrics that you just go, what's he talking about? He's off his tits, right? But I loved him for it. He came back and he just, you know, what was that injection? I think there's something wrong. I really like this jacket, but the sleeves are much too long. And it took me a couple of minutes to figure out what the hell he was talking about. Then I realized he was talking about a straitjacket, and he was talking about where you put people when they're completely mental, which is basically where we should have been, right? And I just cracked up laughing. And so every time Tony Platt said to me, solo, because I did a guitar solo on it, right? I couldn't, but I had to take his vocal off in my headphones because I just kept laughing. Because every time he said that, I just thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. And I couldn't play. So I said, right, okay, you're gonna have to take the vocal out and just count me in, and I'll go and do the solo. And so I did.
The most defined difference in that album was that Robbo, as a guitar player, was surprisingly much more ready to listen to what Lemmy was doing and to try and interpret that and to add to it with the guitar, rather than just play this kind of riff over the top. And I think Robbo actually did take the time and trouble to try and extract some of the melodies that Lemmy was cranking out anyway, and to give him much more of a foundation to sing over the top of.
When Another Perfect Day came out, I reviewed it for Kerrang! Magazine at the time. I didn't like it. In fact, I remember saying I thought this was possibly another nail in Motorhead's coffin, which Lemmy didn't take kindly to, I have to say. And I can understand why. Subsequently, and years later, I have to say I've really come to love that album. I've come to understand and appreciate why it worked. At the time, I thought this was Lemmy and Filthy being Motorhead and Brian Robertson, ex-Thin Lizzy, coming in and just wailing over the top, and there's no cohesion between the two. I was completely off beam because there's absolute cohesion and continuity between the two. It was a brilliant move. Brian Robertson plays some of the best guitar of his career on that record. It has so much fluidity, so much energy. It revitalized the band realistically, and it remains now, strange enough, one of my favorite Motorhead albums. It was a different type of album. Fast Eddie had gone. Fast Eddie was never a great guitarist, but he was right for the time. No other guitarist, I don't think, could have come on and done those 3 great studio albums, Overkill, Bomber and Ace of Spades, or the live album, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. He had what it took to be the Motorhead's guitarist at the time. They made the move away, became slightly bluesier, brought in a much more fluent, much more technically gifted guitarist, and it worked superbly. And it really set Motorhead up for what should have been a fascinating move forward. The problems they had were all business at the time, and that's what held them back. But Another Perfect Day is one of the best albums they ever did.
Another Perfect Day is probably my second favourite Motorhead album after Ace of Spades. You've got Back at the Funny Farm, Shine, Dancing on Your Grave, Rocket, One Track Mind, Another Perfect Day, Marching Off to War. I got Mine, Tales of Glory, and Die You Bastard. And there's not actually one duff track on there. And also what I loved about the album was that Robbo actually did bring a new element. He brought something to Motorhead that no one else could do.
Unfortunately, because Robbo had been a big star in Thin Lizzy and then had his own band Wild Horses for a couple of years in which he was the main man, I think in his mind he saw Motorhead as a step down, which was tremendously unfortunate, because if he'd only grasped the opportunity, he'd have seen it as I did, as actually a step up, because Another Perfect Day is a fantastic album. Robbo's playing, on paper, you wouldn't figure him for someone who could replace Fast Eddie. Much more proficient, much more technically adept player than Eddie, but is he Motorhead? If you listen to a track like Shine, for me, he's totally Motorhead. It's a fantastic song. I never realised Motorhead could go to that place that a track like Shine does. I never realised that they could have a guitarist as good as Robbo and really make it work and still sound like Motorhead, but they did, and they do.
It's a difficult question for me to answer why one song is more accepted than others, because I've found it very difficult to get a handle on why some people like the album and why some people desperately hate it with a passion. All the things, I think all of those songs on that album have got the elements that Motorhead, the great elements of what Motorhead is. The bass sounds on every single one of the songs are absolutely huge, massive. The lyrics, Lemmy's lyric writing is absolutely fantastic.
you know, I mean, I was quite happy as long as there was a Motorhead, you know, as long as that kind of music was coming through. And the Another Perfect Day album with Brian Robertson, I thought was a terrific album. Still do. And the band are sort of bringing a lot of those tracks back gradually into today's set list. Lemmy's always been positive about all their albums, and I think that one got to about number 26 anyway, so the fans were sort of pretty positive. But I mean, just recently they've done Dancing on Your Grave, Shine, I Got Mine, live in concert. They brought them back with Phil Campbell playing. And Lemmy always introduces them as the, you know, this track is from the album that you all hated. And we didn't. He had this impression that we hated it for whatever reason, but we didn't. I mean, the only kind of daft track was Die You Bastard. Everything else was an absolute diamond.
Everybody was really happy with it. Nobody was more surprised than I was when Lemmy suddenly started saying how he hated this and he didn't like that, and you know, all that I apparently had just ruined everything. I don't know. I've not ever been able to have a proper conversation with him, which is a bit of a pity, really. But no, he loved it. He really did like the album when we finished. I think he was actually quite proud of the album after we'd finished. You know, I was very surprised that somebody of his strength of character capitulated so easily to the whinging of a few of the fans. Everybody's view about the album is tainted somewhat by all of the stuff that has gone on, mine included. You know, I mean, I'm sure that my attitude towards that album, I tend to find myself a little defensive about it. I think Robbo at the time tried his absolute best. I don't think his initial attitude was that he was taking a step down. I don't think he would have joined the band under those sort of circumstances. I think he saw that this was a musical collaboration that could be really, really interesting. And coming out of a band where he was one of two guitar players, arguably doing most of the work, but not getting all of the glory that should have given him. This was an opportunity for him to show what he could do, and I think he definitely went into that album on that basis. As the problems developed and as the difficulties developed, I think he started to take a different viewpoint. And then I think he was probably as disappointed as I was that Lemmy just gave in to the criticism. And I think he probably, you know, he might have felt that Lemmy could have turned around and gone, no, we made this album because we wanted to make this album like this. And, you know, the irony of that whole situation is that I actually do think that if Lemmy had turned around and just said to all of these people who are going, oh, you sold out, who are you telling that to? You know, I mean, he could have just stood there in front of his fans and gone, bollocks to you. You're talking absolute crap. And they were like, oh, I'm sorry, Lemmy, I didn't mean to say that, you know. We can sort of, you know, we can come up with theories. We can theorise till we're blue in the face about it. We'll never really know. But I still think it's an album that has a deal of affection from quite a lot of people.
A trio situation is always going to be difficult. Always. I don't know, I think Lemmy wanted to go back to where he was and, you know, and just batter out what he wanted to batter out, which is fair enough, and 10 points to the band, right? I mean, the guy's a legend, and he's, you know, I knew him years before I even joined the band, you know, so it's not, there's no bone of contention there.
I'm just waiting for the Wurzel, man. when I was about 30, I tried really hard before that, but when I was about 30, I thought, right, either you're going to have a really good go this time. I did try before, or knock it on the head. So I tried really hard, and I was lucky. I landed this gig with Motorhead. I auditioned. Actually, I read an interview in the Melody Maker with Lemmy, and right at the end of the interview, it said, "Oh, we're looking for another guitar player." It's after Robbo. God bless him, God bless him. It's after Robbo, you know. And Lem said, "I think we'll probably end up with a completely unknown player." I don't know if he's joking or what. Anyway, I went to Woolworths, to the photo booth, and I pulled 4 stupid faces, sent a demo tape off, and let I'm the most unknown guitarist there is. I sent that in, and then I got a phone call. He said, "Okay, come up for an audition." So I did that. And there were about 54 of us, I think. Really? And it dwindled it down to 7. And then I came back up, phoned me up, and said, "Do you want to come back for another audition?" I said, "Yes, okay, I'll do that." So back I came for that one, and there were 2 of us left. He phoned me up, and he said, "There's just you and the Welshman." That's Phil Campbell. He said, "Do you want a playoff?" I said, "Yeah, all right." But we didn't actually have a playoff, and he had both of us. And Phil was great. We came from similar backgrounds, you know, semi-pro bands, trying hard. And that's how I got it.
Wurzel drinks a lot of beer and falls over a lot and likes 4-legged animals. And I am not sure what I am. One day I hope to find out.
I believe whenever a band introduces an extra element, there's always an adaptation problem. If you go from 1 guitar to 2 or 2 to 3, how do you actually meld them together? Remember, Motorhead had been a 1 guitar band all their career, despite the fact that Lemmy wanted at one point for them to be a 2 guitar band. So all the songs were adapted and played for 1 guitar. Now suddenly you had 2 guitarists who came in. It could have been a mess with the 2 squabbling over who did what. It didn't actually become a mess because the 2 naturally gelled. Lemmy knew what he was doing when he said, "I just decided to have both of them because they were both so good." He knew they could complement each other. Phil Campbell had the ability to lay back and play rhythm while Wurzel played lead. Wurzel could do the same while Phil Campbell played lead. And it had enough of a different style so that Campbell was slightly more metal and Wurzel was slightly more bluesy, that they naturally fitted into certain songs. It fattened the sound up quite considerably. And of course, it opened up an awful lot more potential. So that the songs such as Overkill, or Bomber, or Ace of Spades, or Chase is Better Than the Catch, or We Are the Road Crew, suddenly took on an extra dimension because you had this fattened sound on stage. And for the new material, they could write for 2 guitars, which again opened the horizons.
I have a great rapport with Phil Campbell, just because we came from similar backgrounds, you know, semi-pro bands that we tried very hard with. And it just dropped on with that one. Well, I thought it was well suited to Motorhead, personally.
2 great guitarists. I mean, Wurzel and Phil are absolutely blinding guitarists. And I remember seeing them for the first time, and it was like, yeah, this works. This works good. Yeah, well done, Lemmy.
Okay, I'm going out now.
Not like that, you're not.
You look like a juvenile delinquent.
Fantastic, great drummer. And Campbell got him involved, Phil Campbell. And so, sorry, it's smoke. I said, we need a drummer. And Phil said, well, Pete Gill from Saxon would be good, and he was superb. And we had 4 great years with Peter. Really enjoyed it. We'd come off the stage jubilant every single night and dance around the dressing room, you know, shaking hands and all that. every single gig. And Pete said, I haven't played in a band like this before, where we all come off and are so jubilant. But we really, really enjoyed it. We played well. I thought we did, anyway.
No Remorse was an album that Motorhead decided to use as a retrospective introduction. So what they decided to do was introduce the new lineup while also reminding people about their great moments. So they did 4 new tracks: Locomotive, Snaggletooth, Steal Your Face and Killed by Death, which all went on the Greatest Hits record.
Well, we did 7, but we put 4 on there. I don't know whether the other 3 went, but we put 4 on that one. The management said, we want to put a compilation album out. And Lem said, oh no, not unless you put one double album, not unless you put 1 track of this new band on the end of each album. So I wrote that. I did Killed by Death. Phil did Snaggletooth. I wrote Steal Your Face, and Phil did Locomotive.
Now, Locomotive, Snaggletooth and Steal Your Face are quite decent tracks. They don't really stand up to the great Motorhead songs. Killed by Death, though, that's the one. Because Killed by Death is one of the best songs that Motorhead ever did. It's funny, had a hilarious video to go along with it. It was a marvellous record. It's a great song. It still stands up today. And whenever now people say great Motorhead songs, that's going to be in the top 5 or 6. So for that track alone, it was worth introducing the band with those songs.
Killed by Death is one of those fantastic Motorhead moments, which is got to be one of the greatest titles of a rock track ever, because no one knows what it means, but kind of knows exactly what it means. And it's Motorhead, and we are not only back, but we are badder than ever. Killed by Death.
I still think Killed by Death has got the most unique title of any song ever written. And I'm not being patronising. I really feel it's only Lemmy could come up with something like that. And I don't think he ever got the credit for it either, in the sense that it is something quite unique. Lemmy could write that, nobody else would have done.
I'm very proud of it, yeah. The solo was good as well. I used to write, me and Campbell used to write in my bedroom. We had a house together in Chamberlain Road, try that riff, and he'd had a little bit to it and so on. Then we'd record that in the studio, then Lemmy would come in and write the words. It worked like that. So, well, you do that solo, you do that solo. We tried to share them out. There was no ego thing with me and Phil. It was very good.
Oh. Well, I don't take downers, but we do uppers quite often. Uppers and downers. What do you mean, in the career? Well, it's like with any band, I think. It's bound to be up and down, isn't it? Especially at night in a hotel room. It's up and down a lot of the time now.
What was the most important event?
The worst. down we had since I've been in the band, and it's like 7.5 years, was the court cases, I think. You know, when we had those battles with the record company, we had to get away from them. That was the worst time for us, because we couldn't record anything new. And there's all these fans waiting for an album. Like, this album was the first studio album for 3 years, I think. So that was the worst time.
Sadly, if you read his book, he admits that the best times he ever had were when he was with our record label, and when they finally left and went to CBS, they were treated quite badly. So I always think that's a bit sad, actually, because we had an injunction. They actually wanted to leave Bronze. We had an injunction that was in place that prevented them from recording elsewhere for about 18 months, which was bad for us and bad for them. And then, you know, years later to read that he actually realised he was better off when he was at Bronze than at any other time. It makes it doubly sad, really, but they are. But that's the music business again. That's people backbiting and saying, oh, well, you could do better if you went to a major label. They went to a major label and never had any more success. Well, I think they probably left because we packed it in. Bronze Records went out of business in '86. I sold the catalogue. So they probably went elsewhere because they had no alternative by then. But it is interesting that nobody was able to pick up what was there and run with it. So there's a special sort of knowledge needed to sell Motorhead records, which apparently we must have had because we did very well.
It's always difficult to know what goes on between a label and a band, and Bronze Records were effectively a very, very big independent label. Huge success with Uriah Heep, enormous success with Motorhead, other bands, Manfred Mann's Earth Band and so forth. Bronze are probably a lot more relaxed than most labels. However, I'm sure, and I stand to be corrected by the powers that be who were at Bronze at the time, there was an input from Bronze into the way that Motorhead developed their albums and recorded their albums, and input into the producers that they used. And therefore, they exercised a certain influence on the way Motorhead's music went. I'm not saying it was an undue influence, I'm not saying it was an adverse influence, but it has to be an influence. Once Motorhead left Bronze and went with GWR, for better or for worse, I think they had more control over what they did. And I think it worked beautifully with Orgasmatron. It didn't necessarily work very well with rock and roll, which came next. And of course, there's pros and cons. Sometimes the label's influence can be positive, sometimes it can't be. And I think maybe had Bronze been a little bit more forthright on Iron Fist, it could have been a better album. However, what Motorhead got with GWR, because it was owned by their management stable, was, I think, complete freedom. Do what you want, go there, make the music, our job is to market it, which is what labels should do.
I think those sort of bands have to be released by a label that understands bands, touring, what it is to be on a road. You know, I mean, I as Uriah Heep's manager, I was on the road all the time, so I knew what it was. I knew what it was about. I know what the fans are like behind the stage. I know why people turn up. I know why people buy merchandising. It's all part of it. If you don't understand that, you're not really running the right sort of record label.
I think personally, Orgasmatron, which was the first proper album made with the four-piece lineup, is one of the best albums Motorhead ever did. It's an exciting album and it's a different record. And all you have to do is listen to the title track, which is a slightly more experimental song. And you know that Motorhead were trying different things here. It was as if having the extra guitarists in the band, in fact, having a new lineup, Lemmy being the only one who remained from the previous incarnation, the classic incarnation, had given him a severe kick up the arse. So suddenly, Motorhead were there, and it was a different Motorhead, and they weren't hampered by being on the Bronze Records label, because Bronze had gone, so they were moving in a different direction. They were on the Great Western Records label, which is owned by their management, and just allowed to do what they want, and the horizons opened up. And Orgasmatron is a very fulfilling album, a very satisfying record, and a real way forward.
But it was their first album after the Robbo era, and while Another Perfect Day had gone down like a cup of cold sick with traditional Motorhead fans, even though people like me thought it was pretty good, this was very much a return to their roots. And so they were having all the fun of the fair, and they were going in and working quickly and getting straight to it. But now they've got 2 guitarists and a really good drummer, and the opportunity is there to be Motorhead, but also to be Motorhead plus, if you like. So it's a much more rounded album than they had made before. But still, I think for me, you know, you can't really beat the title track, Orgasmatron. That number is still in their set to this day.
Orgasmatron itself was just such an absolute showstopper because, I mean, the lyrics are just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And apparently Lemmy woke up in the middle of the night and wrote the first verse, and then the next day he got up and he'd totally forgotten he'd done them. I thought, well, they look pretty good, I'll do a couple more. And one verse is religion, one is politics, one is war. And they're fabulous lyrics, you know. I mean, he was great at lyrics anyway, but that kind of really stamped him as being one of the great lyricists of our time, really.
Easy song to play. Them just wanted a few, just one chord will do fine, he said. So Phil said, okay, we'll do it in E, and it really worked. It was about the words, you know, about what he'd written. Very good.
Again, another great Joe Patagno cover, and the tracks, Deaf Forever, superb track. Nothing Up My Sleeve, 8 Microgram Claw, superb track. Mean Machine, Built for Speed, wonder what that's about. Riding with the Driver, fucking brilliant song. Dr. Rock, and the title track Orgasmatron, which has been covered by God knows how many. Sepultura is one that springs to mind, but Orgasmatron is you know, it's a classic Motorhead song. Okay, not up there in the Ace of Spades category as far as the general public are concerned, but I think you'll find amongst Motorhead aficionados that Orgasmatron is a strong favourite. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot riding on this album. You know, it could go either way. You know, success with Another Perfect Day hadn't come. Okay, it went at number 20, but you know, it all fell to shit very quickly, even though it was a superb album. But this was back to the good old-fashioned Motorhead sound.
Your eyes were set my crown, for I acknowledge the God of war, and I look at you now.
Great album. I loved it. Yeah, that was... Me and Phil wrote that in the bedroom, again in Chamberlain Road. Yeah, just wrote it very quickly as well. But we had Bill Laswell and Jason Casaro. Bill Laswell did something for Mick Jagger, I think he did one of his albums. A well-known jazz bass player. And Jason Casaro, I don't know what he worked with, but they were superb, the pair of them, and they made that album sound that way. But we wrote some really good songs, I thought, on that particular LP.
You know, everywhere we've ever played, I'm sure. It's the same with a lot of other bands. No, everywhere. Everywhere in the whole world. You know, it's like they want, oh no, don't use the carpet, don't make a mess on the floor. And there's never any fucking ashtrays. So fuck them.
Ace of Spades, all right. Doesn't make the devil, no even the blame. It's all I get to me.
How would you describe Motorhead?
Very fucking loud.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can get a hearing aid. Yeah, it's a superb band to play for. Absolutely superb. It had a different way about it. It wasn't with every other, like all these other bands. Well, not all these other bands, but an awful lot of bands and ones I played with and stuff didn't have the same feel as this band. Didn't give a flying, but they were on the ball all the time. Yeah, it was great. It was a great band to play for, and I'm very proud of that.
And not really like any other band. I don't know, I guess it's, we're not really in any kind of a niche. You know, I mean, well, we've been put in niches or pigeonholes by the press and that, but I mean, everybody's got to be labelled, haven't they, I suppose. We've always just thought of ourselves as Motorhead music, because we're kind of like diverse, you know. I mean, we play some numbers that could be interpreted as like thrash or whatever, some numbers that could be heavy metal, and still a lot of it is what we would call like hard rock, you know. I mean, when we started, there was no such phrase as heavy metal or thrash or black metal or death metal.
It's not thrash, it's not speed, it's not death, crash, black, god.
Wank metal or spunk metal or whatever, you know. I mean, it was just hard rock or heavy rock, which is how I would describe it anyway.
You know I'm about to lose, and gamble is for fools, but that's the way I like it, babe. I don't want to live forever. That's right, babe. I don't forget the joke.
Motorhead not just have been going for so long and done so many traditional concerts, they've also played, and I think probably the only rock band to ever play at the Royal Opera House here in London. It was all part of Ken Livingstone's week of events in London, and I can't imagine Ken Livingstone suggesting let's get Motorhead to play the Royal Opera House, but obviously someone at the London Council did, and what a fucking pat on the back. Give that man a fucking rise. And it was an amazing gig. It was absolutely one of the best sounds I've ever heard. Right at the end, the last number, I'm proud to say that it was me that lit the joint up, and I did smoke a joint in the Royal Opera House. Probably one of the only people ever to have smoked a joint in the front of the Royal Opera House. Who knows what Pavarotti and that lot get up to backstage. But yeah, I'm proud of that. And it's only because of Motorhead that I could do that. Thank you, Motorhead. Smoking a joint at the Royal Opera House, that was fucking rock and roll.
You know, when I started Motörhead, I thought, well, nobody's going to want to hear this, but I want to do it anyway, you know. And now, 16 years later, I'm still doing it. Same horrible fucking band, you know. And people are still queuing up to see it, so it's all right. The easy way to survive is you don't give up, right? I mean, it's just as simple as that. I never considered giving up.